Hi guys, it's Alyssa from Alyssa's Bake Shop. Today I'm going to show you how to decorate this bunny cake two different ways. The first is using fresh flowers to make a floral crown, and the second way is to just use buttercream and do a simple design. I'm using some fondant so that we can make the ears and the little feet. I made this fondant the day before so that it had time to dry, and I found these really cute cutouts that I will put a link below for where you can print them yourself. Now I'm just rolling fondant out on this hard surface, but in reality it is probably easier to roll your fondant out onto maybe some cornstarch just on your kitchen counter. I didn't have the space to do that at the time, so that's why I'm using parchment paper. But I'm just tracing the cutout and then I'm just using my finger to smooth it a little bit. And then I'm just going to put these to the side so we can work on the inner part of the ear. I'm using a deep pink gel food dye and I'm just putting a little dot into some fondant and then I'm stretching it and folding it over. You can totally wear gloves if you are afraid of getting it on your hands, but when you do it this way where you just kind of keep pulling and folding, it doesn't really make a mess at all. Mixing colors into fondant is actually really fun for me. I'm not sure why. It's kind of like Play-Doh. We want to roll out the pink fondant until it's pretty thin, and then in this cutout sheet it also had the inner ear shape, so I just made sure to roll it out big enough so that we could trace it and so that I could actually cut out both of them in one go, so I didn't have to keep rolling out the fondant. I'm using a butter knife to cut it out. You guys might have a better way, but this was what I had on hand. To attach everything together, I'm using some very thin skewers, and about a third of the way up is where I'm just kind of pushing it in. Now I'm just using water to glue everything together because this design is really simple and it's not big, so it's not gonna take a lot of drying time. There are other things you can use. You can use edible glue, but for something like this, I really don't think it's necessary. I'm doing the same exact thing for the other ear, brush on some light water, and then we're going to put these aside to let it dry. I did want to try to curl the ear, so what I did was just using my fingers, I made the curl and then I let it rest against this edible paintbrush that I have. And we are going to let them dry overnight. And then we have to move on to the little rabbit toes. This was incredibly easy to make. If you're not really skilled in fondant, I'm just gonna say that this really took 10 minutes and under. So I had just eyeballed a chunk of fondant and then I cut it in half and rolled it into a ball, and then using the palm of my hand, I just kept pushing it down. I didn't want to be too thick, I just wanted it to be maybe about 1/4 of an inch thick, and then I kind of squished it together a little bit so that it was more of an oval shape. To get the little toe beans, we have to make 2 angular cuts, and I'm just using that butter knife again. And then I'm going to go in with my hands and just soften those edges so that they're a bit more round instead of triangular. With our leftover pink fondant, I'm just going to roll it out pretty thin, and I'm using a Wilton 1A tip. And if you don't have the Wilton 1A, there are plenty of other tips that are very similar in shape. It's just an extra big round tip. I'm going to use both sides of the tip to create the little toes. We want to create 2 circles using the bigger end of the tip and then 6 circles using the smaller end. For the 2 bigger circles, I'm going to use my fingers to just kind of pinch it because we want it to have that oval shape just to match the foot. And I'm just going to use water to glue it on the same way that I did the ears. Then we're just going to glue on the little individual toes the same way, and all we have left to do is just let these dry overnight. We made it to the cake assembly part. So what I did was I baked a 6-inch carrot cake and then I filled it with some cream cheese icing. And then I made buttercream icing for this one because it was requested by my family that they were tired of Swiss meringue and they wanted buttercream. Frosting the outside of a cake with American buttercream is always tricky to me now. Now that I've used Swiss meringue buttercream so often and I'm used to the silky texture, American buttercream sometimes is a little difficult to work with. So my tip for this is to make a crumb layer like how I did here, and you want to refrigerate it in between so that when you go to put on your next layer of icing, your cake is very stable and it's not going to be moving around. You can see that this top layer of icing is super white compared to the yellow one underneath. What I did was I mixed it for about 10 more minutes, and then I added some white food dye and the tiniest little drop of purple food dye to counteract that yellowness of the butter. All that's left to do now is assemble. So we're gonna do the floral crown first, but in order to do that, we gotta get the rest of the bunny together. So I cut the skewers a little bit because they were too tall for this 6-inch cake. And I didn't do anything special for this, I just eyeballed it and made sure that they were even. One thing that I recommend is if you are gonna be doing a lot of baking, buttercream can last a while in the freezer, so I recommend making a batch of black buttercream, and if you save it and freeze it, you will have a lot of reasons to use it. So this was actually buttercream that I had made for a previous cake, and it's just so much better than having to mix it all the time. We all know how difficult it is to achieve a black buttercream. Okay, you guys saw the right eye go on perfectly, but for some reason I struggle so much with the left eye. So here I am just kind of going back in and fixing it, and then I wind up using a toothpick and I had to go on the other side because there was more light over there. Then I used some pink buttercream to make a tiny little nose. And then the last step is just to attach the little feet. And I just did this by putting some buttercream onto the cake directly and just pushing it on there so that they'll stick. This design is a good looking cake by itself, so you don't really have to do anything else in this. I really like how it looked very minimalistic. In hindsight, maybe I should have added a tail. But if you want to take it to the next level, we're going to do our floral crown next. We have to prep our flowers by removing the leaves, cutting the stems, especially if you're using roses, you don't want a thorn anywhere near the cake. I actually wash my flowers as well, and it's really good practice to do research about the flowers that you're going to put on the cake. A lot of flowers are not food safe and really shouldn't be on a cake. To make these flowers as food safe as possible, I'm going to be using floral tape. You could also try to use some floral picks, and I found these on Amazon and I can link below. Unfortunately, these were too small for the stems, so I had to think of another plan. The first thing we're going to do is we want to wrap our flower stem in floral tape. Now to activate the tape, you have to stretch it because initially it's not going to be very sticky. After you stretch it, then you can start at the top or the base of the bottom of the flower, I should say, and then just wrap it all the way around, making sure to cover the entire stem. This is just going to make sure that anything on the flower is not going to go into the cake, and flowers themselves hold a lot of moisture, so it's very easy for flowers to leak even when you think that they're dry. So we want to just make sure that when we get to the end of the stem, we're just kind of wrapping the tape around itself to seal it. I want to mention that fresh flowers just don't last very long on the cake and they will wilt very quickly, and especially if you're keeping this cake outside for a while as well, because when you think about it, we've cut their stems and they're not sitting in any water, and it's a live plant, so they're not going to be able to make it that long. So unfortunately, it's a little bit tricky, especially if you're selling these as a home baker. It's always good to let your customer know the ins and outs of fresh flowers, the safety, how long they last, etc. A lot of times home bakers will actually have their customer purchase the flowers themselves, and then the home baker will assemble it the day of the pickup order. When I was doing custom orders, another thing that I would also tell the client is that when you go to serve the actual cake, don't serve the flower with it. It might seem like common sense, but even though a rose is technically edible, It's really hard around my area, at least, to get flowers that are completely organic and pesticide free. So you don't want that to be on someone's plate. It's just always good food safety. If you feel comfortable, you could also write a little note and instructions and include that with the order when the customer picks it up. Our stems are all nice and tightly wrapped, so the next step is to put them onto the cake. Because those floral picks did not work out, what I'm going to do is use a bubble tea straw. So I just cut the bubble tea straws in half, and I'm going to insert them directly into the top of the cake. To be strategic with this, you can put 2 flowers into 1 bubble tea straw to limit how many bubble tea straws you're putting in. And again, from the home baker perspective, you also want to tell your client that this is how you're going to be structuring the cake, so when they go to cut it, they're aware of all of the bubble tea straws. I love how this very minimalistic floral crown came out. The flowers weren't too heavy because it wasn't too thick of a flower crown. It was just very light and airy for spring. This would be so adorable if you were going to have a spring backyard party or a picnic or something like that, just to have it outside. Now we're going to go into the simplistic buttercream crown. With my leftover buttercream, I'm making 3 colors: pastel pink, blue, and purple. I attached a 1M tip to a piping bag, and I put half of the pink and then half of the blue into the same bag. I didn't have too much of a design planned out. All I knew was I wanted it to be simple for any skill level. So the first thing I did was I removed the flowers and then I started to pipe on the buttercream. I'm just making these kind of dollops by just piping, and then you pick up your hand and then you pipe it again and then you pick up your hand. And then I also alternated between using some rosettes as well. You can really just do whatever you feel. A quick story is that when I used to work in the bakery, when I first started, I had absolutely no idea how to pipe or even fill a piping bag. And my coworkers, who had a lot of experience, they were really nice and they showed me, and I'll never forget that because I would not be here without their help. I put that purple pastel buttercream we made into a separate piping bag, and I just used a small star tip, and I'm just gonna pipe it randomly all over. I like doing this because I like when there are different types of textures, and it just makes it look like it was a little more complicated than it really was. I found these cute little pastel sprinkles, and I'm just gonna put it over the cake. I love sprinkles, I love glitter, and I put glitter on everything. I refrained from doing it on this one because I know not everyone likes glitter, and I wanted to show you guys how it looks without it. But now that I am looking at these clips, I am feeling like it really needs some glitter. And that's it for these 2 designs. I really liked how both of them turned out, and they are both very simplistic. You may need to purchase some new tools in order to do some of them, but if you're gonna get into cake decorating, all those tools that I used will be handy for other cakes. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.